Welcome to Off Planet Radio Live. My name is Randy Maugans. It is Wednesday night, August the 8th, 2012. And it's hot in most of the country right now, isn't it? I think most of you people, especially in the southwest part of the country, have had quite enough of this intense heat that they've been turning up. And of course, the temperature's hot. In terms of the human soul right now, with all that's going on in the planet, so much to spin through tonight, and I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do it with my guest, who is really, I guess, one of the people that I love to have on, one of the people that I enjoy talking to. He is provocative, insightful, and always forces you to challenge your assumptions about things. And without any further ado, I welcome James C. Horak. James, welcome.
Good evening, Randy.
Good evening, my friend. It's good to have you back. It's been way too long. And what's the temperature like where you're at, James?
Well, we have a storm coming in, but it's still 95 degrees. It's been dark all day, but we have storm warnings and all that, but don't think I'm going to get much of it and haven't had any rain yet. So all the trials and tribulations of a storm without any of the benefit.
That sounds like pretty much just about everything right now, James. It's like we get all of the shit and none of the surprise that would bring us some joy. But we have joy anyway because we're on the right side of the argument. And I wanted to get you back on because I watch what you post. I watch your website, and your website is emvsinfo.blogspot.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And because sometimes I mess that up or you forget about it, and it's important to put that out there.
I more often forget about it than you mess it up.
But you have some terrific people behind you on that website, and some people posting information as well.
Yes.
And it's been a while since we talked. A lot's been going on. We have pretty violent landscape right now, certainly here in the West, and number of shootings that have occurred recently raise a lot of questions about what it is that the cabal's up to, because it looks to me like both of these most recent shootings are kind of lined up in order to hide some things or to continue the illusion that they are actually still in power. This most recent shooting at the Sikh temple in Wisconsin looks very interesting. The head of the temple was the father of filmmaker Armadeep Kaleka, who is presently working on a film with Dr. Stephen Greer. And there's a number of directions we could go in that regard, but I think it's just telling that we have what looks like another mind control shooting on the heels of the Batman shooting the end of last month.
Yes.
That maybe you want to spin through some of that as well, what your take is on it, James.
If nothing else, and there are a number of factors that mass media will never discuss about this, especially about Robert Holmes and his son, and the discrepancies in the images of the young man that was supposedly the shooter. A lot of people that are familiar with forensic investigation of photographs and imagery say it's not the same man. And Mr. Holmes, the father, was about to give testimony in the Senate on something that was highly explosive. It's probably the biggest banking scandal that ever hit, and probably another one of these things that siphoned off trillions of dollars from the American economy. But it looks to me like there could be a blackmail scheme in all of this to try and force Robert Holmes from testifying as he was going to.
Yeah, because he has, apparently he's the chief computer scientist for FICO, which is the credit rating service for all of the major banks.
He came up with a method, a coded method, to break down transactions to determine their pattern, which would draw high inferences on fraud.
Sure.
They have the same pattern in laundering money. Well, there's an additional element to this, not just an illegal movement of funds, but the pattern behind it and what it is in response to. It's called trending. And he perfected a pattern for that, which would hold up in a court of law. So it makes him extremely dangerous to the monsters that have been looting America and taking the money offshore as fast as they could. Grubby little paws could manage it. So, yeah. Now, in all of these killings that I am pretty well assured are false flags, giving a loose meaning to that phrase, I think that you'll find if you investigate, there are three objectives. If you assume they're intentional, that they're part of the overall globalist conspiracy for gun grabbing, for avoiding criminal charges, accounting, and for setting up maybe the next false flag or some other symbolic gesture which encourages their following, the secret society following, that this time we're going to be on schedule. We didn't do it in 2000. We didn't do it in 2007. We didn't do it in 2009, but we're going to do it this time. Yeah. You lose followers, even though they're madmen. You lose them when you don't live up to these schedules, you know. If you look closely, you see three objectives and three levels. And the reason for that, and you see it in the music industry as well, the reason for that is that above all, above CFR, above Westinghouse, above all these other think tanks for these people, is the Trilateral Commission. And all of these people basically, philosophically, are trilateralist. That's hence the symbol of the triangle. So three objectives, three levels, always. And that is their calling card because they're very brazen about what they do. They don't want to hide it now. They don't correspond with the earlier principle that they used for 40 years of gradualism anymore. No, they're quite brazen about what they do. And recently, Obama's science czar was outed by our good friend Kevin Smith. Not that he was the first to investigate, but he has put it out there that this guy is a social engineer, and social engineers in my book aren't scientists. This guy had written a book back in 1977 where he outlined enforced abortion, enforced sterility, and population control in a global society that was regulated and controlled by a standing foreign army. Namely, you know, what would that be? The UN, of course. These people, these hounds of hell, have been lining up all their ducks in a row, and they intend to go through with a lot of stuff. You know, I've always mentioned the euphemism of the head of the turtle being out. And it's out. Yeah. It's out. Finally. But for most Americans, this isn't real until they start going hungry and losing their homes. Then it'll be real. And they'll say, well, you know, there's no good reason for this. What is a reason for this? They're fertile to new thought, suddenly.
Do you not think, though, that in general, the American people, the people in the West, have gotten a whiff of this now? There seems to be, even among people on the street, the sense that there's a betrayal, that the system doesn't work anymore. The bankers have tipped their hand, and these guys have been playing loose and fast since 2001. They pulled off the most spectacular ritual murder in probably the history of the modern world with 9/11. Yeah. And every move that they've made ever since has been the attempt to clamp the pincer movements right around us. But there's resistance, and the resistance is coming from people who have felt the pain of the financial scandal that began in 2008, the pain of the people who have to pass through grope and grab tactics by TSA and airports, who feel like their own police have now been turned against them and get the sense that, oh my God, we are now living in a very Orwellian world. And this is not paranoia. This is simply the reality of the man on the street. It's beginning to come around a little bit. It's almost bleeding out in the edges now. It's almost like it can't be contained anymore. And the revelation of the LIBOR scandal in Britain was another layer to this as well, because for a long time, most people have not understood how finances actually work. The fact that banks were lending each other money basically on an overnight percentage spread, and how these banks have rigged the game to keep their own credit ratings going, which goes back to the father of James Holmes again. Because until now, we have not had any transparency or disclosure, even about how banks work on the most basic level. Most people in the modern world do not understand how banking really works.
No, banking in the first place is not even a concentration of wealth. It's creation of debt. It works on the basis of someone that is in a cartel family, yet doesn't want to work. They're a playboy or a playgirl. And so they're given a trust fund. Now, that trust fund is set up on the basis of, say, $25 to $50 million, and the principal is never touched. They live off the interest.
Right.
Well, that's that's the basis. In other words, this principle is actually a symbolic asset. Banks have their grubby little paws on it and do whatever the hell they want. And, you know, if this wasn't a cartel family with pull and push, or push and pull, they would be at risk of losing it, because bankers no longer subscribe to any kind of regulation. They steal people's money all the time. And I would expect that after they have worked people to buy gold, and people have bought up all the gold that is for sale, that's not in the vaults of the Rothschilds, Liechtensteins, Rockefellers, or whatever, that they will then declare a Gold Reclamation Act, and all these people will see the banks close, like on Black Thursday back in 1934. And when they open the following Tuesday or Wednesday, all the gold's gone. Because it's illegal to own gold. They can do that without telling you. You know, the master of the sleight of hand, as far as executive order is concerned, is Mr. Obama, President Obama. And,
Yeah.
you know, you get a secret executive order that is kept secret, like a warrant that is held back until it's opportune, which, you know, is not right. May be legal, but it's not right. Well, 50% of what Mr. or President Obama has done may be legal, but it's not right. And a lot of it is just flat illegal. So, where he was born is a small part of it, but it's enough to start. It's enough to start. And the fact of the matter is, if you start out wrong, if you start out breaking the law, you're not going to get any better if you get away with it, are you?
Well, from what I can tell, this is a completely illegal president. We have a man who was foisted on us. He was basically springboarded into the public spotlight, a junior senator from Illinois, and voila, 4 years later, this guy is president. And in the process, we don't know where he was born. We don't know much about this guy at all, where he came from. And this is Zbigniew Brzezinski's work. He is a genius at foisting illusion upon the American people. And so we have a president that really, I don't think anybody's comfortable with this man. And yet at the same time, he has, I have to laugh. There are blogs out there that continue to defend Obama as this light warrior. And I mean, every time I read this garbage, I have to retch. It's like, if this guy is a light warrior, he better soon do something to demonstrate that he's on the side of good, because I don't see any indication.
No, there isn't. There isn't. Any time that you defy the social contract that exists between all levels of the society and is the basis for both law and governmental structure, whether it's the courts or whether it's Congress or any branch of government and government agency, once you break that, then there is nothing. The government has lost its legitimacy, and now it's rule of force. So in that atmosphere, he has a death list. And then he has begun the domestic, not just the foreign, ordering the assassinations without due cause, without criminal charges, without any evidence on citizens of the United States of America. You know, this is outrageous. We suddenly are under a tyrant.
Yeah, we're under a tyrant on a number of levels, and it's been economic all along. And the great illusion has been the creation of fiat currency under the Federal Reserve that began in 1913 and has continued, and then it was just escalating. You talked about the confiscation of gold, and I actually have in my possession a gold coin that my grandmother hoarded when FDR confiscated gold in the 30s. And the difference today is, James, those were farm people who were able to sustain themselves off the land. They were people who were able to trade among themselves, and there was still, in that time, the ability to sustain what some would dismissingly call an underground economy. I would argue that that's the real economy.
That is.
And that the false economy has been the fiat currency.
Right.
Most people don't realize that money, you know, this is one of the questions that I began asking about a decade ago, and it took a long time to work around it. What is money based on? It's not based on gold. It's not based on silver. It's not based on land. It is based on the sum total of human labor.
Yeah. Well, you know, the saddest thing I ever heard, and this was back in the mid-90s, there were a number of people who had already seen the trends in the military, who were military people themselves, like Bo Greitz.
Yes.
Who stepped forward. They said that this was coming. They expected it long before now. In fact, they knew, like I knew, that it was intended to be implemented in full by the year 2000. They knew that, and so they were in preparation for it. It didn't come about. And so they sort of lost their glamour or their notoriety, but they were right. And one of the saddest things I ever heard in my life was that I would see the day when bullets would be the coin of the realm, when people would be trading a brick of 22 long rifle ammo for food, and that would command the highest price. That would be worth a lot more than its weight in gold. And I had to realize that there was some sense to that. And having to realize there was some sense to that really saddened me, because it is a harsh truth that to know that in times of food shortages and in times where they're out to get your guns and take away your ability to defend yourself from marauding outlaws, from people that are after your food, that are after your life, that you would come to feel that the only defense you had was weapons, and that the value of ammunition would be the same, just as important as food, because without it, you couldn't protect your food. These harsh realities are what these monsters want to impose on us and then sit back in their safe haven. But I'd like to talk about that safe haven that they have in mind, because there are a number of fallacies that even the cartel elite have bought into, which I would like to sort of attack, because there are two elites. There's the entrenched cartel elite, the members of the cartel families who regard themselves as having bloodline and all that BS. And then there are the people at the very top of the military-industrial complex. And they're the facilitators and implementers. They're the people that have been given special power. You've heard them called MJ-12 or Majesty 12 or whatever. But there is a group. There is a group. You can call it by different names, and you can represent it differently. But these people exist, and they are not the entrenched elite. They are the professional elite. And without them, the cartel elite would be helpless. Well, I will tell you this much. They have the cartel elite convinced they have safe haven, so that no matter what happens, whatever, that's not true. And they know it. The professional elite know it. My feeling is that after they have begun depopulation and stabilized their power, that they'll get rid of the cartel elite. In fact, I know that's in the offing. Because what's more useless? What is more useless? It's like you and I know that bankers are useless. We know that they don't deal any real value, that they create that and they waterboard on it. That's all they're worth. Well, these people look on them the same way. The professional elite, the people that have their hands on the throat of all the mechanisms that it takes to accomplish what the cartel elite wish. But when it's all said and done, these people will be in control and not the cartel elite. And they'll be in their underground cities where they'll be easy to dispose of. All you have to do is find out where their air is being buffed and knock it out.
That's right. And who would know that better than
the people that built them?
Exactly.
The people that built them. Yeah. Well, that's an element of justice, but that does. What our concern is that before that happens, that there are good people within, because let's say, who wins out doesn't matter. It's the people that are gone that we lose, that go through the suffering and the death. And on top of that, the situation, the condition of the earth when it's over. It won't be a place anyone will want to live. And indeed, I have said that if it even starts, it'll be over. And the important thing is the people that are on the inside that are not necessarily pathological madmen, like so many of the decision makers are in both elites, that figure out, well, it's not going anywhere. I don't want to live in this world this is going to end up being. And say, once they have a resistance on the outside, these people on the inside that have come to this way of thinking will have a reason to take the chance to oppose it on the inside. And they're already grouping. There are already people in there. Some people refer to them as white hats, but that's not what I call them. I call them Faction 2, because that's what they call themselves. I'll name the one that was very prominent, who has retired. I don't know what he's doing now, but that was Admiral Bobby Inman.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby Inman was Faction 2, and he was very powerful, very learned. But he's the only reason that we have STS-48, the video, because he made it possible for us to get it. So he wanted us to see that there were things going on, there were technologies that we had some control over that could do the things that you see in STS-48, because we wouldn't have been able to be provided with that video if it wasn't being done on cue as an exercise that was scheduled with his knowing and with the knowing of the people that were involved. So that's very important. And of course, when it was presented, when it was shown on 2020 on television, and when people have looked at it and everything, it's never been treated to that explanation. They've never made a deal about, well, who ordered it to be transmitted on an open channel when it had been determined that anything coming from the space shuttle first went to a closed channel, was filtered, decided what would be made public.
The only thing I'll say to add to that is that humanity truly does have to get off of its knees and stop looking to leaders and start realizing that each person is their own leader, and that when we begin to recognize each other, we can start working together, because that's what it's going to require to survive and to advance beyond the present grid that we're living in. And I don't know how you feel about that, but I have no faith in leaders anymore.
No.
And, it's time to tighten it up. It's time for people to realize that we came here, we were each given a measure of consciousness, a measure of intelligence, and that we were supposed to work together, but we were not supposed to be put into a concentration camp, which is effectively what we are in Western society right now. This is one gigantic slave colony.
We have been gradually treated to bite the bullet. 911 was the prow of that ship.
Yep.
since then, it's been exploited to the extreme. And every year we've given more up, more and more. It happened to the English first. Every country where they've grabbed the guns, violent crime rate has gone up. In London, for instance, there was no such thing as home invasion until the guns are grabbed. Home invasion, more than likely, it's like in carjacking, someone gets killed. And of course, the thugs that commit these crimes are armed. So we have so many things that we need to look at right now.
Yeah.
And take a stand. Take a stand. I don't care what happens, what kind of BS laws are done to betray the purpose of the Second Amendment or anything else. You give up your guns, you give up every option you have to be anything but a slave to what these monsters want to do to you, and you won't live long. Go to a FEMA camp, you won't come out alive. Period. When you understand that, and enough people understand that, they won't do it.
Yeah, I suspect that there's still enough backbone left in this country, and I think they know it. I think that's why they've not succeeded. I think they were, frankly, a little scared, even by what was going on in the internet this spring, when there were the rumors coming out of the Drake movement that inside the military and inside of the militias across the country, there was a will to begin taking back the government. And of course, all that's been compromised. A lot of it was disinfo.
A lot of it hasn't been.
And that was the other side of it as well. That's the
Randy, let me tell you something. You know that something you can feel, see, and touch is a lot more than something you can't.
Right.
I mean, when we're talking, okay, starting last year, I have base privileges. And I go out to one of SAC's former major bases. Now it's a joint base, Joint Naval Air Force. Carswell. Used to be Carswell. And they sell guns out there. They sell ammo out there. They sell accessories for guns out there. What do you think of that?
I'm imagining they were doing a business based on the sales of guns and ammo.
Everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. Once
Hillary committed treason by negotiating a treaty with a foreign power without the consent of Congress. Once she did that, and people knew that this was a gimmick to lead to enforcing search and seizure of weapons, and incidentally picking up people on their blacklists, like me. I hope I'm on the blacklist. I feel very discouraged if I wasn't on their blacklist. But gun sales went up over 40%. Do you think these people are buying guns and ammo left and right to give them to federal agents? Or, you know, Mexican gang members that they've armed to go out and loot people's homes?
Yeah. I keep holding out for the fact that there are those within the military that are going to uphold their oaths. We have the Oath Keepers. I know that the scuttlebutt on the internet has done a lot to kill off the best intentions of some of the militia people out there, but they're not going to go away.
No.
And there is a will in this country to rise up. That's the part of me that keeps believing. I mean, I took a fair amount of ammo in the ass over interviewing Drake and basically giving it some credence because there is
I think you should give it some credence because
there's a ring of truth in it.
The idea is sound.
What happens on the internet is everything becomes grist for the mill. Everybody analyzes it. People take sides and disinfo agents move in. And that's a lot of what has happened in this movement. Is that it did not have the ability to gain critical mass and it didn't have the ability to mature.
Let me tell you something about that. We know that the powers that be poll everything before they act on it. Even now.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think that Faction 2 might not do the same thing? And might use someone like Drake for polling?
Of course they are. They've got their finger in the wind. They want to know what the intent is.
I think Drake was used to poll reaction for Faction 2.
Very interesting. Well, they do know that there's a will.
Yeah. I would like to discuss something that's been on my mind now ever since Carrie Cassidy did an interview with Dr.
Yeah, let's go
Norman.
there. Let's go there.
And I say this because I think that it may be the gentleman's last interview, because he has been frightened into going into seclusion, which he mentions in that interview. It was very unfortunate that the arrangement for him to give his interview was with Carrie Cassidy. I'd like to discuss that. And I'd like to say that if someone's watching that, they will notice that he was talked into giving that interview by a friend of his, John Lear. He probably didn't know the slightest thing about Carrie Cassidy or her mannerisms or anything, but she was totally unfit to give that interview to a scientist that made one of the biggest breakthroughs in the history of mankind, and she didn't know flip about it. She hadn't read his book. She says that from the beginning. And the way she handled him was not like she was trying to interview someone that you should be eminently respectful of, but like she was giving a cross-examination, like, well, I don't know whether I believe that or not. It was in her manner. It was in her body language. Center reverse speech. So there were so many things that came up that weren't followed up. And one of these things has to do with what was going on in his private life with respect to an attempt to kill him, with respect to the fact that a safe deposit box that he had in a bank was broken into and things were taken, which he brings all these things up in the interview. She just doesn't ask, well, what was taken, why, or anything. Because she didn't want the answers. That's just the thing. The whole thing smelt of a setup to make sure that his potentially last interview would be with someone that wouldn't explore. He was going to write a second book. And it's very important to discuss what the potential of that second book might be and what might have been in that safe deposit box that they went through so much trouble to get into and take. And I have an idea what it was. I also have an idea, more than an idea, what was going to be in that second book, at least some of it, because I had been privy to it. And it would have, I would like to shake up the relationship between the two elites. I'd like to do that tonight. Because the one thing that would have been in that book would have shaken up the love affair between the two elites.
Well, and we're going to go there. Every time the subject of Project Camelot and Carrie Cassidy comes up, I inevitably wind up sticking my face through a plate glass window, but I'll go there one more time. I have watched over the last 2 years as Project Camelot has slowly slipped into the toilet as Bill Ryan eclipsed and the handlers who are behind Project Camelot have risen. Watching what they have posted on their website on a day-to-day basis, which I no longer monitor, but I did for about the first 6 months of this year, I've now become convinced that Carrie Cassidy is very much a plant and a dupe. She was put there to discredit people. She was not there to air whistleblowers. She was basically there to expose them, and to expose them oftentimes to harm and sometimes even to death. And I believe that what she is doing is following a carefully mapped out agenda. Her interest in Dr. Berggren is not to validate his work. Her effort is to discredit ultimately, even though she doesn't maybe come out and say that. And I'll just say, I didn't watch the interview. The reason is because, quite frankly, I can't take watching or listening to what she is doing anymore. I would love to have seen the video. But I will say this. She has no interest at all in validating the work of the EMVs because Carrie Cassidy holds a malevolent view of anything off-world. And she is part of a scare tactic campaign to discredit anything non-human as an active agent in aiding mankind. And she's been very blunt about that over time.
Well, you see it in all her interviews. I mean, she's constantly trying to turn and twist what these whistleblowers have to say into the hostile alien thesis. And, of course, that is part of the New World Order's plan to fully implement the New World Order as a police state. a corporate police state. Some people say this is socialism. Some people say it's communism. No, it's fascism.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And, that's the thing. That's one of the things that the media has played on all along. The media has played upon this lack of precision and discernment that's in the wording of the way they report things or the way that they comment on what other people say that they report on. And you have, especially in my part of the country, a number of people that can't distinguish between ideologies, can't distinguish truthfully between religions, can't distinguish between the ideals that exist or coexist with them if they're different religiously or ideologically from their own. And this is one of the things, they made a big mistake when they massacred those people in that temple, because those people are some of the most peace-loving people on earth.
Yeah.
And to try and portray that as a hate crime or as anything more than what it was, mindlessness, is absurd. Because those people don't put up a red flag, I'm this, I'm that. They go about their way of life peaceably and without imposing on anyone else. A lot more so than do Christians or any other group. So that's not going to wash the way they thought it would. It brings to mind what the devil is going on. If people start asking that question, they're not going to take a fed answer. But getting back to that interview, I mentioned to Kevin Smith one time on his show, I think I'd called in, what it was that they fear that could have been in Dr. Berggrun's book, second book. They fear it because what it does, what it will do, is it will take away the faith that the entrenched cartel elite have in their professional elite. And it will dispense with this idea that there is safe haven, that they're going to be able to isolate themselves from the harm they do this planet, because they won't be able to do that. They don't have to believe me. I've already said that once that depopulation starts in earnest, and the head of the turtle is out, that it's all over. Of course, that's a big assertion. So I don't expect a lot of people to believe it. But still, I feel obligated to say it, because I know that it'll happen.
Interesting, as you started talking about this, the Skype connection started going really bad. So keep talking for a few minutes. We may have to actually disconnect and reconnect.
All right.
It's gotten, I don't know what's going on with it.
I can guess.
Yeah, me too. And it's not new. I know Shuni's recording in the background. So maybe what we'll do is take a break here for a couple of minutes. I'm going to hold you over for the full show tonight, James, because as much as I've probably got people bitching and complaining in the chat rooms because we're moving too slow or we're not into the good stuff. But you know what? Sometimes a good conversation takes time to unwind, folks. So be a little patient. My voice is not good tonight. My allergies have kicked in. So I'm sort of struggling to keep it together here. Take a break here and come back on the other side and rejoin with my guest, James C. Horak, on the other side of Off Planet Radio. We'll be right back. Are you there, James?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
We're good. You sound better now.
Great.
Got rid of that nasty electronic hiccuping.
Well, good. Maybe the powers that be are as eager to hear what I have to say as anyone else. Really. I would be if I was in one of the cartel elite families. I would be.
Maybe what we can do here in this follow-up, James, kind of go... I guess the infuriating thing for me about Carrie Cassidy interviewing Dr. Berggrund was, and you mentioned this in your Facebook post as well, she never bothered to read the material, which is a classic. I don't know how many people I've interviewed that have said they were interviewed by Carrie and she never bothered to read their material. Now, there's no excuse for this. She told me in an email last year that she was very much a fan of Dr. Berggren. Well, that begs the question once again, what the hell are you a fan of if you've never read the man's work?
No. If you have an agenda to the exclusion of anything else, like trying to find out what the truth is, you're just a bull in a china shop, and that's what she is. We're not the first to complain about her. There have been a number of people that are contemptuous of her for the way she handled their interview with them.
Yeah.
So,
we've got people in this network that have been botched by what's going on with Project Camelot. And all I can say is this. I've been accused of jealousy. I've been accused of character assassination. I don't want to be Project Camelot. That was never my goal, and I don't give a damn about the numbers. I do this show out of a passion for truth. And people come on, they can say what they want to say. I may agree, I may not agree, but people get a chance to be heard saying that. That's the philosophy that Dave has behind Wolf Spirit Radio as well, for the most part. And it's really tragic that this is the largest website out there doing this work, and that it has devolved to the place where a major figure like Dr. Norman Berggren has to suffer at the hands of the butcher of Seville.
A distinction. Well, what was going to be in his book, and I saw the images, and at the time when I saw them, this was about 8 years ago. At the time that I saw them, there were 3 of us involved with him. He didn't deal with me very much after he asked me a leading question. He had me up against the wall, and I gave him an answer he wasn't prepared for. And I understood that, and I expected what happened to happen. And after that, I worked with 2 people that were working directly with him, and one of them ended in betraying him, and the other stayed faithful to him to the end. And I still am in contact from time to time with her. But I saw these images, and my response to these images was that he should save those, that he shouldn't come out with them at that time because they were so fantastic that he could show the EMVs in the rings of Saturn. And I had told him that they would be seen in the sun, too. And that's when he asked me a question. Well, how do you know this? How do you know this? How do you know this? And I said, after he kept on and on, I just told him because I'm not from here. And of course, he couldn't deal with me.
We're going to go to that in a second. One of your variances with him was over the fact that we would expect to see EMVs in the sun. Moreover, you've extended the argument to the place where the EMVs are working here as well.
Yeah.
In the last time you were on the show, James, you dropped something near the end of the program that I wanted to pursue a little bit, and it goes along with the EMVs. It has to do with the cities of the sea, which you described as biological entities that are krill-like, which are basically stabilizing the oceans, even taking out plutonium and things like that. Can we expand that a little bit and maybe break that out a little bit?
Well, they're very massive. Usually they're along the edges, the sides of the Atlantic Trough, where they're not detectable. And if you send a bathysphere down to look, it looks like an amazing growth of different jelly-like entities in a colony. And so they go basically ignored. But when they're free, they form what people on the sea, navigators, using sonar, call false bottoms. They're the source of most false bottoms that are detected because they do move around, but they're very massive and they're performing a very important work. They're used for cultivating life in the sea, for getting the chemistry in salt water correct, and for disposing of toxic waste when it is a problem. And that's what they've been doing in the Atlantic Trough now for 40 years, because they can ingest plutonium and render it harmless. But I have made the statement that, so to speak, and I quote myself, you can kiss your ass goodbye when you see them leaving the ocean. Now, they have been in the upper atmosphere, and they've been photographed there. Spiritual technology can create mirages, it can create blinds, it can keep you from seeing what it doesn't want you to see. And so when they come out of the sea and they go back in, they are invisible. They're invisible to detection, period.
Are these what we would call extraterrestrial life?
They're engineered life.
Okay.
They're engineered with a specific purpose of doing what they're doing. They don't have intelligence. They have purpose. And they are under direction. I mean, if this planet comes to the worst end, we're not going to let them suffer. Get them off the planet because they can live anywhere. They can absorb solar energy the same way the EMVs can. They are magnificent in their own right, but they don't have the emotional intellect that EMVs have.
As I'm listening to you talk about this, and it's one of the things that I've kind of percolated over the time that I've digested the EMV material, we're not served real well by this idea of ourselves in this insular Earth, this sphere called planet Earth. We detach that completely from a larger ecosystem, which includes our galaxy and our universe. And the idea that these are living entities, that the planet's alive, the galaxy's alive, the universe is alive, and that there are all different levels of life. And increasingly, I tend to follow David Wilcock's idea that calling them extraterrestrials is just another form of calling someone a nigger.
Yeah. I don't find very many things with which to agree with Mr.
Nor
Wilcock,
do I.
That's one. That's one.
That's one of them. Yeah. This is the human division. This is part of, I think, what you talked about in the last show with split consciousness. We have this way of slicing and dicing everything so that we never recognize that we are part of a holistic system that is sustaining us. I mean, left to the rampages of modern man, this planet should have been blown up. It should have been polluted beyond any ability to survive life. And the toxicity level should have, at this point, have reached where we would be basically reduced to our most component elements. And this has not happened. There is a divine intelligence that guides all of this. And I think that's one of the things that people miss when they examine your material, James.
Well, it's happened 6 times already. There has been 6 extinctions. And this one, the forces of nature have been more indulgent with you. ET has been more indulgent with you because this will be the last. If worse comes to worse, this will be a new sun. And this solar system will be a binary system with 2 suns. Humans originally came here to this system, had evolved. I don't mean evolved in the sense of come from the mud, but had built the defining culture for humanity in a binary system. And that was part of the problem in adjusting to this system, is that they established on Mars first, and they tried to duplicate what they had done in a binary system, and it just didn't work. So the stage where you go to master your sun, and there are a lot of astrophysicists today that look upon the stages of culture developing, and the 3rd stage has to do with the mastery of your star. But that shouldn't occur unless it serves a purpose. Before you get that far, you should subscribe to becoming a member of an extended community like you were too proud to do. And had you not been too proud to join an extended community, there are always people that are thousands of years ahead of you that can foresee things before they happen. And you wouldn't have lost your original system if you had done that. But it was possible to have joined an extended community way back then. Your ancestors are very proud people, very independent, and they like to think they could handle everything for themselves when it wasn't necessary, and that led to losing your system. And that was the binary system.
You actually dovetailed into a question that came up on the chat that asked the question. The person asking the question says the most profound question I have is, what is the purpose of human life on Earth?
Well, I wish I could say that it's more than survival. On Mars, it was more than survival. A very sad series of events happened that cost you your original system that wasn't foreseen, and it happened very quickly. Only the survivors that were on the moon, that were traveling to colonize a very distant series of planets in what would have been relatively deep space, survived. And of course, once they lost their home base, they were desperate to find something closer than their destination, which they were still over 100 years from reaching. So this system was fairly close, so they came here. And this system was inhabited. It wasn't like it was no company. So when they came here, they had help to settle and to reform. Of course, this will explain why your moon is so much older than everything else in your solar system, and also why you have a problem with your consciousness. You see, it is an extreme weakness to be able to be hypnotized. That's divisive. That's a weakness. That's a frailty that you can be taken advantage of through. Most mind control utilizes that in some way or another. So instead of realizing that and trying to make the best of it, you've sublimated it. And that's a big mistake, because it's given the people that can use that know how to use that, gives them a lever over you. And you have seen the degradation of the individual over and over again into class or caste. That wouldn't occur in a culture that was manifested with unified consciousness.
A lot of people don't understand that they're listening to you right now, referring to us in the second person, that your perspective isn't really the same as me sitting here talking to most of the people that I interview. That, as you stated, you're not from here, and that you have a very long reach back into history and understanding of the planet.
Well, I never talked about this until a couple of years ago, the first time that I came on the Kevin Smith show, and that was at Kevin's urging. I had been in contact with an individual that knew Kevin very well, and this gentleman had been a member of AFCON. And so now he won't come out and say, yeah, I can back up some of what you say or anything, that he has a security oath not to talk about, period. But I don't think that this friend of ours would have stressed me being on Kevin's show and have supported that idea so strongly had he not thought so. Of course, I'm presumptuous there. But he's a friend of mine and Kevin's, and he calls in quite a bit. He is a fan of Kevin's, like me. But the real issue is that you're at the 12th hour. And I break convention. I break my usual protocols to come forward and say what I have said, and to try to put forth enough to try to encourage people's belief in the immortality of the soul so they don't feel like they're going to lose everything if the monsters win. And also to get them to be aware that the righteous man has a power and strength considerably greater than what can be mustered against him. And that's always been true. And if you go to your Bible, you'll remember in a passage that says, I will lay no task upon thee. Mm-hmm. Well, that's where that comes from. That's what that's in reference to. Even the King James Version has a little gold in it in places.
I think for the listeners who are scratching their heads right now, and I see some on the chat, you're going to best be served if you go over to EMVsinfo.blogspot.com. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see, going down the page, series of shows that James did with Crystal Clark called A Refined Cosmology to Address Cosmic Anomaly, Lifting the Veil Part 1 and 2. And if you listen to these interviews, you will get a decidedly different cosmology than what you have heard from other speakers, from other people who have addressed these issues. It's very coherent. It goes into a great deal of detail about who we are, where we came from, and it relates to the EMVs and the sun and the work of Dr. Norman Berggren. And the reason why I have James Horak on is because over time I've gotten to know him and I kind of know who he is. And many of you don't grasp the nuance of what he's talking about or the position from which he's speaking. And I know that sounds very mystical, and you're going to have to let it ride there, because if you task yourself to listening and reading what is on the EMV's info website, you will understand this. So it kind of cuts off the idea that we have to do this whole long thing again. There's also a series of interviews on Off Planet Radio as well. You can just keyword search James Horak on Off Planet Radio. I think what's important about this is that we do begin to understand who we are, and that we begin to understand our destiny and our place within the families and the tribes of the universe. Because what you said earlier, James, is we have not really tasked ourselves to join with those who are out there, who are part of our family. We view ourselves as earth dwellers. We view ourselves as creatures of this earth. And by doing that, we've cut ourselves off from our own history and from our own legacy.
There is a question whether or not the split consciousness can be civilized. Now, those aren't my words.
Right.
But I've had plenty of faith, and I see an intensity and an emotional integrity that the ETs, for the most part, have lost. If we can bring this new blood in, a variation that has such tremendous creativity and intensity, something that the extended community finds fascinating. If we can bring you in, if you can be true to a moral core, if you can remove aberration or aberrance from your collective and from the individuals, which I feel you can. And there are ETs that have an open mind about it. The one argument that I've used, that the presence of the EBs is a confusion that should grant humans here on Earth, earthbound humans, greater consideration, because the EBs have interfered. They have been used by black ops, and they would be represented as the hostile ET, although they, in themselves, they're not hostile, they're just problematic. But they are not ETs. They are chunks of meat sewn together with a computer terminal. And that's
I always smile when you say that.
That's not sentience.
No.
By any stretch. People have asked me, oh, what's Computer Central and whatever. Computer Central is a protocol that the people that created them for deep space travel instilled into their collective. And I think it's still running. I don't think the black ops or the cyber experts among you, I don't think they have the ability to override that protocol. The civilization that created them is very advanced and built them with the thing in mind that they would not interfere with the fledgling cultures they might come across. Now, that's been jeopardized to some extent, compromised. But basically, they don't participate in anything hostile. They're equipped for self-defense. They carry a sound weapon in their hands. They're not malevolent, but they're just problematic because they keep spinning around in this vicious cycle. And they know that ET wants to get rid of them. So they have made a kind of a pact with people here on Earth that if they will hide them from ET and protect them, that they will give them technology or whatever. However, that's very limited because none of these EBs are good technicians or scientists. They don't know the principles or the technology behind what they have. They know how to repair it. They know how to use it. But that's it. And they don't recover their own. That should tell everyone something about them right there, because ETs recover their own.
I've never asked you this before, but something popped up on the chat, and it actually jogged my memory. The MyLabs operations that have been going on in the United States that we know of since the 1960s at least, how complicit are they with perpetrating this whole malevolent ET agenda and propagating the grays, which you identify as being the EBs, the extrabiological entities?
Well, they had their genetic experiments on people. They wanted to classify any genetic variation that might be to a specific subset and find out why. They wanted to determine if there were people that were bred with off-Earth explorers that may have crashed here or whatever. This was a big obsession with them because they were looking for ways to justify their bloodline BS, and they were looking for ways to exploit differences that they could base their privilege on. It's all been to mind warp. You can call it mind control, but some of it I prefer to call mind warp operation. You got to be mind warped to keep an old hag on the throne and let her take more and more of your GNP every year, don't you?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I hope I offended a few people there.
Absolutely.
They're people that needed offending. But, I've spoken to a lot of good English people, and they feel the same way, although they're very reticent to come right out and say it. They got laws over there in England that make some of ours look tame, England was the first real modern police state.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Really was.
Cameras everywhere. It's completely locked down. Yeah.
My God. That's why if you really want to get down to it, 7/7.
That had everything to do with getting the Olympics, by the way. It was after 7/7 that London was granted the Olympics, which are going on right now.
I think that there are a number of good people that have been very oral about some of the plans that the Illuminati and some of the other subset monsters have come up with to make some point at the Olympics this year, and maybe it's been called off. I hope so. I hate false flags, and I have had something to do with dispelling a few. And if you really want to know the truth of that, you just look at the blog when you get there. I know it's a lot of homework, and I wouldn't want to have to check up on somebody by going through all of it myself. It just depends on how deep you want to get into it. But, Christians talk about the Word. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, I don't look at it as mystical at all. To me, the Word is something that chimes with you inside, that has a chord it can strike with you that suggests a clarity you wouldn't find otherwise. That's what I think of when Christians use the Word. And they sit down with the Bible. Like I said, there are bits of gold in the Bible. And I came across that when I was about 4 years old and had to memorize a number of books in the Bible over a period of time in order to be able to go to the movie when I stayed with my grandmother, who was Pentecostal, and looked upon the movie as Devil's Workshop. And my mother would leave me a dime to go to the movie. And Granny would say,
you just dated yourself with that dime movie thing there, James.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But, yeah, I'm 68, about to turn 69 in October. Not that that's relative to anything. But, I think of age as vintage. Of course, there are some people that don't. But
well, it's like everything else that man has done. He's stigmatized age to the point where now our elders among us are relegated to the sidelines. And, it would serve people well to recognize that you too are going to get old. And when you get there, it's not going to be a real comfortable ride because you have already planted that meme into the minds of the younger generation. We want to take people now and put them into all these neat little categories, which is the mindset of the eugenicists. Eugenicists need to categorize people because that's how the culling process takes place. So a lot of this bigotry and racism and categorization of human beings is all part of the eugenics agenda that's been sewn into the culture for over 100 years.
Well, it's been exploited. It's encouraged. And there are people that don't understand or can't grasp because of their agenda that affirmative action is racist. They can't realize, and it was done by the government to drive the gap between the minorities further. That's not how you go about bringing people together. You know, Malcolm X had the idea. That's why he was assassinated. He wasn't a racist. But the government is. The government wants race warfare because we're fighting among ourselves. We don't have the direction and we don't have the focus on them, on the people causing these social problems. It's not minorities. It's not people from Mexico, although I believe that the law should be upheld. And if they're illegal, they should go back to where they came from until they can figure out a way to do it legally. You know, we need to be a nation of laws that are applied equitably across the board, enforced the way that the people that made the law intended, and not decided upon by a president or even Congress that wants to be politically correct or wants to sidestep the issue or make concessions that are unlawful. And we have a host of this. This doesn't just involve illegals. It doesn't just involve tensions between black groups and white people, but it goes all the way to the way that we look at the Chinese, the way that we look at the people in the Middle East. And that prejudice that we harbor allows the monsters to keep us from having the ability to discern closely issues when they arise that they can use to play on those prejudices. I've had people tell me that, well, I don't care what you do with the Muslim, they're no good, they're this, they're that. Well, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. The same with Jewish people, the same with black people, the same with Mexicans, the same, you know. You discern the issue, you don't define it by the people. You discern the issue by the issue. And if we all did that, they wouldn't be able to play on, there wouldn't, you know, this thing about hate crimes, that's another bizarre.
Yeah, this is.
That is not the law applied equally.
No, that's a specialized definition designed to, again, subdivide perpetrators.
That's
to make
right.
specialized forms of, I mean, all crime originates from a seed in man, which is this split consciousness that you talk about. You know,
Yeah.
The thing about it is, and you grew up with, you know, understanding the Bible and the Word, and you know that the law is written in your heart. My position is that laws are written for lawless people, that once humanity overcomes this split consciousness and is able to reintegrate, all of this becomes very clear. We don't transgress against each other. And by doing that, we become secure in ourselves and we become secure against being divided by enemies, domestic and foreign. And
Well put. I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're a Christian humanist. And of course, fundamentalists.
I don't know if I define myself as either one of those, but both of those play into my background.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's nothing more that a fundamentalist despises than a humanist.
Yes, I'm well.
And of course, that's wrong. There have been more erudite, intellectual Christian theologians that knew that that was just insane.
Well, the idea of the humanist argument was basically imposed by fundamentalists who distorted their own Bible. Because
That's
when
right.
Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that you are gods?" what was he talking about? When he said that the kingdom of God is within you, was he bullshitting us or what?
He was talking about the perfectibility of your immortal soul.
Exactly. And
That we all
humanity
have.
has been trodden down and told they're less than and to go worship something else and to obey authoritative voices outside of themselves instead of looking inward to find the wisdom that lives within them and the divinity that was part of them from their inception. And this goes to the core of why this problem never goes away, because, and David Icke said it, humanity, get off your knees. Now, I'm not a big fan of David Icke, but I got to say that the title of his last book was brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I look at a lot of these people that have some sincerity, though they're influenced by misconceptions. And I feel that David Icke and Alex Jones have some remarkable misconceptions, especially in buying into the reptilian crap and other things that I just wouldn't give any credence to at all, because it takes the responsibility for what is going off away from those that are responsible. And it keeps us from getting the accountability from them that we deserve. No, they want to create a boogeyman, and so it's the reptilian, or it's, that's bizarre.
I got to answer a question here. I got a question in the Wolf Spirit chat room. The listener is posing this to, I think, me, but maybe you too. You have spoken about racism and eugenics. Do you hold the same point of view about men's violence against women also? I would say go back and listen to last week's show where I discussed the sacred feminine with my guest, and the fact that I have kind of gone through a sea change in recent years about females, and I don't even think it needs to be said. I used the N-word at one point in the show tonight, and when I did it, it was painful to say it because I do not take that word lightly.
No, I know you don't. You can't start out to change things by holding to old ways that are counterproductive to your own focus. And if we're going to come together, let's come together in a way that does not repeat any of the old patterns that led back to the problems we're fighting now. Embrace people of difference because they're your brothers.
In a sense, here's my view. In a sense, violence against the female because she is allegedly weaker is a crime against yourself.
It is.
We are born into this world being equal parts male and female, and we have that side of us as a balance. I have met women who are stronger than anything that I've seen in some very great men. And I've met men who are very capable of accessing the side of their personality that is the best of femininity.
You want to off-earth observation about the conflict between the sexes here?
Sure.
I think that most of the problems between the sexes here is caused by a presumption that one should dominate the other.
Yeah.
And that presumption is reinforced. Women are symbolically castrated by fashion. The Chinese carried it to the extreme in bonding feet. But we don't do much better. We enforce on them an idea of beauty that is extrapolated from pretty much the same thing. High heels, which harm the inner legs and cause problems with back and muscles. Cosmetics that poison them. Habits and restraints of fashion and practice, which delineate them to subservience of their time and their money, and the preoccupation with having to find security for the offspring, which, is remarkable and should not be exploited, but it is. They make less money. There are too many men that will wink when they see women sexually hassled. And the government isn't sincere in its efforts to work out any of these problems. It makes them worse. Feminism is an agenda.
Right. That was what we were offered as a solution. We were offered feminism by a bunch of lesbians, which does not embrace true femininity. Now, that's not
if you're going to say that, I want to say something, too. I want to say, fashion trends for so many years are set in Paris, France by gay men that were in competition with the women. So they were creating fashions which ultimately demasculated these women, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
That's my idea. That's my prejudice. Of course, there are a lot of people that would disagree with me because the fashion industry is very powerful.
Well, it is very powerful, and it is part of a control mechanism. It's where a lot of people make a lot of money putting out very trendy things to churn more money.
But women shouldn't feel like they have to wear as much makeup as a clown or stilt their heels up 6 inches above the ground and wobble around to be attractive and alluring. I mean, my God, a good, healthy male looks at a woman walking down the street just naturally and sees beauty. The way a woman is built is magnificent.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's just, I go outside and I see my cottonwood tree and other things, and I see beauty and splendor. And if you put a bunch of Chinese lanterns out there on the limbs, that doesn't make it any more elegant to me, or even decorative. It hides more of the beauty than it enhances.
Yeah, it's like cutting down a tree and putting it in the middle of your living room with lights on it. Somehow it seems less than compared to the idea of going out looking to it in its natural environment.
That's a good metaphor for the way in which women are treated, But they bought into it themselves, and most women would resent what we've said. They would resent it because it's part of their life so much.
I see by the comments, too, I need to contour my remark a little bit. When I talked about feminism being foisted on us by lesbians, I meant political lesbians.
I knew that was coming.
And see, this is, again, part of the whole dialectic of things. This doesn't have anything to do with prejudice against people's lifestyles or personal lives. It has to do with the politicized, polarized positions that were sold. There was a reason why the walls came down, and it didn't have anything to do with liberating people to be who they were. It had to do with contouring the culture, of breaking down what were called the norms. And there's nothing wrong with that if it serves the purpose of humanity, but it didn't in this case. It broke down structures within the culture.
It created another agenda. It's like the split consciousness in hypnosis. Agendas do the same thing. They gap people further apart. And you have seen agenda-driven people that didn't have the common sense to be wise. They were after that next plan of attack, no matter what it did to the country, no matter what it did to other people or anything. As long as their ends were served, that's all they cared about. And as a consequence, people lost freedom over what they were up to. We saw women's movements back in the 20s or earlier perverted into prohibition. Women had all this clout. Women's suffrage had achieved political equality for women if they would go that one step further, go for equal treatment in the workplace. But they didn't. What did they do? They co-opted themselves for prohibition. Demon rum was the reason these men were the way they were, and if they didn't drink, they would be civil and nice, and we wouldn't fight with them. That wasn't true. What did it probably increase drinking? Prohibition.
Well, yeah, because the Bronfmans and the Kennedy families were shoveling all the booze in from offshore and basically bringing it in and making a pile of money. Fortunes were made.
Do you know who started the Kennedy family in bootlegging?
I do not.
Onassis. He'd bring it into Boston Harbor, and they would take it.
That explains the subsequent marriage of Jacqueline Kennedy to Onassis.
If Onassis hadn't married her, she wouldn't have lived a year because she saw who blew her husband's brains out in that limousine.
And she comes from a very interesting stock as well, I guess, in terms of what you would call cynically breeders.
Bouvier.
Yeah, the Bouvier family. Yeah. These are bloodlines in the sense that basically they were passing along genetics, and that family suffered horribly as a result of it.
Onassis had been a friend of hers before she married, and it was Onassis that okayed the operation because Onassis was head of organized crime in the world. He had assumed that after Madame Chiang Kai-shek gave it up.
The world is not what it seems at all, is it, James?
Never was. Never was. I'm not saying anything you couldn't research.
No.
If you stuck it out. And, of course, I do have an advantage. I'm not so studious. but I do have an advantage. One of the most impressive people, and he was a womanizer. My grandfather was a womanizer. I know many men that I think a great deal of. They were womanizers, but that's the times. You know, that's how they thought they should be. But John Kennedy was a great man.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he was probably our last great president.
Yeah.
He was probably our last president. The more I've studied history, the more I've realized that after JFK, they could not allow another presidency like that.
That's right.
Every president after that was tightly controlled, including Johnson, which is why he didn't run for re-election.
They didn't have to do very much on Johnson.
No. He was already pretty softened up. He had already seen the horrible results. He was still drying the blood splatters off. So basically after that, they had to take out Nixon, and then the rest of them were pulled into line with either bullets or some sort of blackmail.
Well, you know, Robert Morningstar is correct when he describes the incident over the Cuban Missile Crisis where Westmoreland did everything he could to start World War III. If people today believe that we've come to a point of civility with regards to the use of nuclear weapons in warfare, they're sadly mistaken. And if they buy into the BS that the media tries to justify that view with, that there is such a thing as limited nuclear exchange, that's the biggest BS there is.
Well, here's the other thing about this, and again, we've never talked about this, but my understanding is that every time we put off a nuke, we are casting all kinds of repercussions out across the galaxy. That we are literally blasting a hole into what is called the space-time continuum, the fabric.
Well, every hydrogen bomb that's detonated below or above ground changes time, and they know that. If you had the benefit of what Einstein and Velikovsky worked out together, a unified field theory, that would explain what I'm saying. But you don't. And it's because that they wanted to handle the creation of détente between the Soviets and the United States and the NATO nations and the alliance, because they wanted to handle it in the way they did, where you would have two superpowers just cut up the pie for themselves, which is what happened between the Soviet Union and the United States. And basically what changed that was what they presumed would be the trend in the future towards establishing control of the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And Israel played a large part in adding to and exacerbating that situation. And they were doing everything they could to get their own atom bomb, and then the delivery system, and then they wanted a hydrogen bomb, of course. Israel ended up being gifted with the second largest munitions industry in the world.
And an anti-defense system that is second to none, including our own.
Yeah.
This is not discussed, and now we're getting ready. They keep trying to heat it up with Iran because, I don't know, this Middle East thing to me is the most perplexing thing of all. It looks to me like on one level, Saudi Arabia and Iran are both on the same team, along with the U.S., and it looks like Syria and Iran have targets on their backs right now.
Well, the alliance has become blurred over issues in the Middle East. This is one of the things, you know, you have a problem understanding the Chinese. Chinese are accused of being inscrutable, but they're some of the most interesting people in the world. I mean, there are people that want to condemn them because they sell us such crappy products. That's not their fault. They haven't had a completion. They haven't had a Teddy Roosevelt. They haven't had what it takes to clean up their act coming into the industrial age fully fledged. Mm-hmm. Their idea of a market is that they're selling to Americans, and screw the Americans. The opium wars wasn't that long ago, and that's their attitude. And, of course, what people fail to realize is that these workers that are getting these very, very modest wages, that money goes so much further than it does here.
Well, it goes down to the consumerism in America And the idea that we thought we could live without an industrial base. We were sold the lie that we were post-industrial, which we are, and we were handed an information technology society which disappeared in less than a decade. We now are a post-information society, post-technological, and we have evaporated most of the ways in which you would normally construct a viable economy in this country. And we want to blame it on cheap goods from China. Well, we designed those goods.
Well, China has as much to lose as the United States.
Absolutely.
Let me do this. If you become the industrial manufacturer of a nation like the United States, and at the same time they become your market, what happens when your market, I mean, the super rich are not buying any of this Chinese crap. So what happens when the middle class and the lower class cannot buy your crap anymore? Then all of a sudden your plants get shut down. You got a class of wage earners that are out of work. And it's even on a larger scale and happens more dramatically, more quickly than it did here. But there are so many issues to that. The Chinese are hip to social cohesion. They have had to maintain social cohesion since the Boxer Rebellion. So they're very hip to that. And they created what we would call a middle class. And then they created an entrepreneur class. And then they produced some billionaires. So they have had prosperity, and they have had the money to build elegant cities with elegant structures and to solve a lot of the internal problems that we are now beginning to have because of a lack of funds they have. But that's coming to a screeching halt. And as we encroach closer and closer to China's border with the Middle East and that of Russia, we give them a lot to be concerned about because they need to keep an influence in every region of the planet, and they have a right to. And people forget that what the United States did with South America for so long, exercising a rather preposterous document called the Monroe Doctrine, which just is
manifest destiny, basically.
Yeah. Well, that was the way of thinking behind that. And, of course, it's preposterous. You know, our whole attitude towards interfering in the governments of Central and South America and Mexico has been based on that trend, or not trend, but tradition.
Well, it was the model, and I know we got to wrap it up here in a few minutes, but this is good stuff. It was the model of expansionism that put us in the place where we are today. It had to do with literal banana republics. It had to do with taking out crucial leaders who were nationalists for their people, the establishment of the IMF and the World Bank, and basically the bankrolling of debt-based economies into countries that were beginning to develop but didn't have the sophistication to understand Western economic models. So on one level, that became ground zero for what we now have, which is this colossal banking scandal, which takes us back to the beginning of this show again. We have used an expansionist model, which is now going to blow up in our face.
You know when that was perfected? It was perfected on a regionalism that was practiced during Reconstruction.
Yes, absolutely.
That was a social model, and they perfected it economically, possessing control of a regional economic system outside of it. You know, your northern bankers sent their agents, we call them carpetbaggers, down. And when people think of the Ku Klux Klan in terms of being racist and being organized on the basis of subjugating the otherwise freed black, that's not the story. That's not even part of the story. The reason was to fight the carpetbaggers. Now, there are always people that have these prejudices and that misbehave, but that was not what was behind the people that organized and tried to use the Ku Klux Klan for dealing with carpetbaggers. You know, I would never have joined the Ku Klux Klan. I don't think I would have fought for the South. But there's a hell of a lot more to the Confederate or the Civil War, then you're told. And it was not over slavery. It wasn't fought over slavery.
No.
And anybody that thinks it is falling into that racist bag. Today, we have the most stringent racists I know of are black racists. They're not white racists.
Absolutely. And, you know, we could do a whole show on the Civil War. I mean, there's so much there that, again,
they know who planned the assassination of Lincoln. Even people like Carl Sandburg knew. They just didn't dare come right out and say the Minister of War, Stanton, was responsible, but he was. He wanted Reconstruction, and Lincoln wouldn't go along with it. And that's why there was a rush to judgment on everybody they arrested. They hung them all before they even heard their pleas for innocence. Then they hung the first woman that had ever been hung in the country, and she had nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing. And that's come out in recent years. But, you know, you had to silence witnesses. The same reason that they had to kill Oswald and they had to kill Jack Ruby.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, we're running out of time here, James. And let people know how they can find you and what you're up to and anything that's going on that you'd like to make known.
Well, I have a presence on Facebook, and anybody that applies to be on my friends list, I'll accept. And also the blog, EMVs.
info.blogspot.com.
Right.
Good stuff, James. This has been kind of a wild conversation we've had tonight, but it was fun. It was fun to kind of go all over the place and just pick up a bunch of different topics and throw them against the wall. You're candid. You are out of the box, and while in some ways you are very much off planet, and I like that.
Well, let me say something for you. You are studied. You have a good moral core. And you're very articulate. I bet your IQ is over 160.
Well, thank you. I think it's dropped a little bit over the course of the evening, though. My friend, it is always good to have you on. You will be back again, I promise. And my computer is starting to develop some really serious glitches right now, which is interesting, but that's happened a lot lately. And you have been listening to Off Planet Radio with my guest, James Horak. Go over to the website at offplanetradio.com. There are shows there that are not live shows, a bunch of new interviews, and a bunch more coming. And some articles that I'm working on developing some new things. And we will be back again very soon with another show. I'm Randy Maugans. This has been Off Planet Radio.